So with Freddy's franchise finally finished with, for now, it's time to move on to what is the longest running and arguably in some ways the biggest and most successful slasher franchise of all time. Friday the 13th. The series that spawned a true American icon in Jason Voorhees, a man so synonymous with the image of a hockey mask that child me was convinced he had something to do with the Mighty Ducks 3 when I first saw the VHS cover in a rental store. Reviled by critics but loved by fans, Friday the 13th became one of the most lucrative media IPs of all time, through both of the success of its films as well as extremely extensive merchandising. And of course, it all starts here, with the original, low-budget, iconic 80s slasher, an intentional rip-off of Halloween thrown together on only $550,000, sold to a studio with nothing more than a poster of a logo and a script that wasn't even written, and directed by a man whose first big hit was a $3,500 softcore porn flick he made while self-admittedly having no idea what he was doing and then snuck into general cinemas under the guise of it being educational. You would think, from this description, that this film would be dead on arrival. An absolute turkey that maybe just barely milks out a quick tiny profit before fading forever into obscurity. And yet, here I am, over 30 years later, about to document, review, and analyse its existence, along with its 10 sequels, and I am far from the only person to still be talking about these movies. Wild how things turn out sometimes. So Friday the 13th, do I even need to summarise the gist of this one? You know the story, right? It's been mimicked, homaged, parodied, ripped off and retold so many times that everybody, even those who haven't seen a single entry in the franchise, has through a kind of pop cultural osmosis at least a passing knowledge of what Friday the 13th is all about. I certainly knew exactly what I was getting into before I'd ever seen its famous machete-wielding maniac firsthand. A bunch of horny camp counsellors are getting their rowdy on the nights before the camp kids arrive and their summer job starts. But what should be a joyous time of frivolous drug use, premarital sex and underage drinking is cut short when a murderous, hockey-masked monster known as Jason Voorhees marches into their cabins and mercilessly slaughters them all in various creative ways. Everyone knows that's what happens. Right? I have developed astigmatism and myopia in the past year, specifically, just for this moment. Well, actually, it turns out that's not really the story at all. The camp counselor killing is definitely correct, but Jason does not appear in this movie, at least not in the way we all know him. Friday the 13th is actually structured as a bit of a whodunit. Instead of seeing the killer for ourselves and knowing who it is from the beginning, we're greeted with these voyeuristic first-person shots of someone lurking in the distance, watching our indistinct cast of campers from the shadows. As the bodies pile up, we're only ever given slight glimpses of our killer. A hand here, a boot there, maybe a quick flash of the back of a shirt, until, in the movie's final moments, it is revealed that Pamela Voorhees, not Jason, but rather his mother, is the murderer behind it all. You see, Pamela, unnamed in this film, just credited as Miss Voorhees, is out to get revenge on what every young camp counsellor she can get her hands on, as decades ago her son drowned due to the neglect of the camp counsellors who should have been looking after her child, but were instead otherwise occupied having sex. Our famous hockey-masked friend, though, is literally nowhere to be found in this movie. His only named connection? A drowned child. A victim, not a murderer. It's a twist that both works and doesn't. It works in the sense that it plays with our gender expectations when it comes to killers within this genre. The reveal that the killer is a grieving woman and not some hulking madman is genuinely quite revolutionary in a way that I'm not sure audiences at the time were expecting. And actually, through sheer luck of the franchise's legacy becoming what it is today, somehow works better now, as it completely subverts the understanding of a younger generation or any newcomers going into this film expecting the Jason they know to be synonymous with the series. On the other hand though, it doesn't work in other ways, as both the character of Pamela and her motivations are only introduced in that final act, and the audience are never really given anyone else to suspect as the person behind it all. So it doesn't become so much a mystery filled with clues and suspects that develops and plays out before you and rewards those paying attention, so much as it is a mystery where the answer is just completely withheld from you until the plot deems it convenient to give it to you. Supposedly, that missing red herring is the role that this guy was meant to have. This is a side character called Crazy Ralph, who warns the campers of their incoming fate. The soothsayer of this movie, a trope that a lot of slashers would go on to have, so much so it's explicitly pointed out as part of the slasher formula in the clever meta-horror The Cabin in the Woods. Now, Crazy Ralph is great. Crazy Ralph understands the assignment. His incredibly campy and over-the-top line delivery and expressions are as awkward as they are memorable. However, his red herring status does not come across at all. I doubt absolutely anyone who has ever watched this film thought it was Crazy Ralph doing the killing. I mean, there's plenty of reasons as to why this is, but for one thing, the dude's called Crazy Ralph. That's like calling your red herring Murder Man McGee and expecting audiences to be gullible enough to believe the shocking big reveal is going to be that the murderer was the dude called Murder Man all along. Perhaps if the story of Jason's drowning death occurred sooner in the film and was told as a kind of urban legend, audiences might have had the time to suspect perhaps the supernatural revenge killer before the rug was pulled out from under them with the far more grounded reality of his grieving mother. Either way though, the part of the twist that does land, namely that it's an older woman at the centre of this massacre and not your typically expected masked monster of a man, lands extremely well, and is probably one of the things about the film that has aged best. This twist, and lack of a hockey mask wearing madman though, is not the only way the pop cultural consciousness surrounding this film has somewhat been at odds with the actual content found inside of its 96-minute runtime. Another would be that despite its famous reputation for being all breasts and brutality, the film actually doesn't contain anywhere near as much sexy titillation as you would think. In fact, audiences of 1980 when the film released were given but one brief moment in which a single boob could be witnessed. Not a pair of boobs, mind you. You get just the one, and you'll make do, alright? Don't be greedy. Also, while on the topic of titties, I find it a little strange that this film is really famously thought of as some kind of conservative morality play. Everyone knows in slashers, though especially in Friday the 13th, that all the teens who drink, do drugs and have sex are always first in line for the machete, and that it's the hard-studying virginal goody two-shoes that is spared in the end and has the great honour of being the sole survivor who lives to tell the tale. Except, that's not actually what happens here? Not really. Audiences seem to conflate this film with both Halloween and the Friday the 13th sequels there, or perhaps take some more memorable sequences and aggrandize them in their memory to be bigger than the sum of their parts. Yes, the couple that have sex in this movie, one of whom is a young Kevin Bacon by the way, are quickly dispatched post-coitus. Gross way to put it, not sure why I said that. But their deaths seem totally unrelated to their divergent status, because a shit ton of people die in this film who do not break the famous horror rules.
Number 1, you can never have sex. Big no-no! Big no!
I'm a dead man.
Number 2, you can never drink or do drugs. And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
Thank you, Scream, for the relevant clip. We'll be seeing more of you later. Included in the kill count of this film are many of the teenagers who aren't seen doing any of the things that you would think would get them slaughtered. But on top of that, there are also 2 people that I think really stick out as kind of particularly contradictory to the whole public perception of the movie. The first is Steve, who is just the creepy dude that owns the camp, but not even a teenage character. But more importantly, the second is Annie, who, when I first viewed this movie with only my pop cultural knowledge of it, I very much assumed would be the final girl. She's cheerful, she's kind, and she's really excited for camp, but not for any horny party reasons. She just has genuine big dreams of teaching children and wants to make the world a better place with her unwavering optimism. She honestly seems like the kind of character who, if say they were perhaps asked to have a drink of alcohol or smoke weed or engage in premarital sex, might reply with a chipper, "Oh boy, I don't know, what would Jesus think?" They give her a lot of early focus and she's introduced separate from the other campers as if to say, hey, this girl is important, wonder if she'll be your main character, wink. And guess what? She doesn't even make it to camp. She has her throat slit before she even arrives. You know who does survive though? Alice, the girl who is in this scene drinking and playing strip Monopoly, which by the way must be the slowest and most unsexy strip game on the planet. You're not making Monopoly better there, you're just making genitals worse. But yeah, in spite of its reputation for being a stringent arbiter of the rules, the film doesn't really have much of a moralistic stance at all. Who dies and who lives feels almost chosen at random to some extent, with the only conscious decision seeming to be to make the sole survivor a girl. Something Halloween did before it, and something this film, along with Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and to some extent Alien, popularised as a trope, which fans and academics would later dub the final girl trope, as first coined by Carol J. Clover in her book Men, Women and Chainsaws. But that aside, teens who have sex, teens who don't, characters who aren't teens at all, they all make the hit list. And the only one who survives specifically breaks the no drinking rule while playing the kind of game that you'd think would doom her in this sort of narrative, as it's one that flirts with the idea of sex and nudity. Meanwhile, the on paper perfect survivor is unceremoniously off before the film even really reaches its second act. Now sure, you can point out that the catalyst for the film's killer Pamela to become the murderous monster of the movie, that her son was neglected at camp and drowned while those who were responsible for him were off having sex, does quite clearly suggest the film is making a statement on having some kind of moral sensibility. But I genuinely think this was just either a carbon copy of visuals they borrowed from Halloween without any thought put into what they meant, and or just a convenient plot excuse to have a twisty killer and some on-screen boobage, more than any kind of commentary on the dangers of teenage sexuality. Because if the film is trying to take this kind of puritanical stance here, which many people argue that it does, then it's one that's inconsistent in its logic with both Annie's death and Alice's survival. And that's the thing you have to realise with Friday the 13th. Any theming, any deeper meaning or bigger ideas leaking through in potential subtext almost feels like a completely accidental byproduct. There is definitely some great discussion to be had on, say, its use and subsequent popularization of the final girl trope, its sexual politics, its ideas surrounding gender subversion when it comes to its killer, but unlike its peers who were trying to say something with their violence, like how Scream is a metatextual breakdown of the genre, or how Nightmare, as we already discussed, acts as a kind of youth empowerment movie examining the politics of adolescence and adulthood in Reagan-era middle-class America, Friday the 13th, more than anything, just wants to exist. And its unwillingness to engage with anything other than its surface plot would be a negative quality in any other film, but here, it's honestly almost part of the charm. It is a rushed, low-budget film with a cast of mostly no-name actors quickly thrown together in nothing more than an attempt to make something scary, fun, and hopefully a bit of cash off the back of it along the way. It's proper seat-of-the-pants filmmaking, and that leaks through into the finished product. But instead of reeking of the kind of desperation rip-offs and cash-ins often do, it's somehow endearing. I can really appreciate its kind of amateur, let's just make a movie nature. It honestly feels almost quaint, especially when watching it now and seeing just how much things have aged and how tame on violence and nudity it actually is by the standards we're used to today. Its budget certainly helps with that kind of quaint quality too. You can feel the purse strings of its low budget being stretched as much as possible. Everything happens in a mostly singular location. There's occasionally weird pacing where the film pads for time with long, lingering shots or scenes that depict characters doing almost nothing. The acting ranges from mostly satisfactory to occasionally extremely wonky. Several of the kills, arguably the main draw of the movie, happen off screen or just out of frame, but then it pours in the dollars it does have in all the places where it counts, making up for its shortcomings with a seasoning of fantastic practical effects by industry legend Tom Savini, who creates all the most memorable gory set pieces, as well as using the budget to bring in its one truly credible actor of the time, BETSY Palmer, who was paid $10,000 for her fabulously unhinged and manic performance. And then it ties all of its good parts together with something genuinely exceptional even by expensive film standards, and that is its fantastic score from Harry Manfredini, which is not only iconic for its tension building leitmotif, but also does a lot of the heavy lifting for the film, basically performing as the second actor playing the killer due to its whodunit style first person perspective framing in a manner similar to how John Williams' theme for Jaws characterized the shark with the sinister dun-dun in the absence of an expensive animatronic. I mean, if you really think about it, the way the film is framed, the vast majority of the time, these actors and actresses are essentially fleeing from the presence of nothing. We're essentially watching them running away from air. And yet, because of that little whisper on the wind, we characterise this unseen silent presence in our minds in such an effective way. And in defence of the film, in the face of the many critics at the time who compared it unfavourably to Halloween and called it a shameless rip-off, which, to be fair to them, it is. Even the director has pretty much admitted so, although he now often uses the words inspired by, it does still have a lot of qualities that give it an identity all its own. The whodunit structuring, the campsite setting, the genuinely quite surprising shock reveal of a female killer, and its uniquely brilliant soundtrack all chip in to make a film that is almost accidentally good. It is enjoyable in spite of itself. In a weird twist of fate, I think it is Friday the 13th's flaws that make it so watchable. I'd hypothesize that the reason for its lasting legacy and impact is precisely because it doesn't want to deal with any bigger issues outside of its creative body count and unique villain. It's like the pub food of horror movies. It's nothing fancy, but in its basic and simplistic approach to pleasing the biggest possible audience, there ends up being something for everyone there, which not many horrors at the time could claim to have. Horror is a real hit and miss genre for a lot of people, because it deals in such dark themes. It can be challenging for a lot of people to watch a film like, say, Alien and engage with the coded themes of sexual violence, or even just the nerve-shredding tension and slow build of dread that oozes from every frame. In a period of time where movies like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, and The Exorcist were the heavy hitters of the genre, it meant that unrelenting, uncompromising titans of terror, often dealing with bleak, traumatic subject matter inflicted upon genuinely sympathetic characters that pulled not just at an audience's sense of fear, but also at their empathy and discomfort, were kind of the defining features of the genre in a lot of audiences' minds. And then Friday the 13th came along to be the pure nonsense escapist alternative to these classics. It gave audiences a chance to engage with all the aesthetics of horror, but with none of the potentially exhausting and draining effects of actually engaging with truly dark subject matter. Yes, you'd see death, but never in a way that was really grounded and realistic like, say, Halloween, or shockingly drawn out and grotesque like, say, Texas Chainsaw. Yes, characters would go through hell, but they weren't real characters like the ones in The Exorcist or Alien that you had to empathise with through their suffering. And yet, technically, challenging themes and dark subject matter could be found in there, like the grief that's so central to Pamela Voorhees' entire motivation as a character, but they were never at any point the focus of a film that mostly seemed to want to say, yeah, drown kid, sure, whatever, don't think too much about that part. But did you see that bit where Kevin Bacon got an arrow through his throat? How gnarly was that? It's no surprise in hindsight that critics hated this movie while audiences flocked to it, because in many ways, these things happened for exactly the same reasons. Critics trying to engage thematically with the film or judge it based on some kind of artistic integrity or in comparison to its contemporaries that had challenged them in a way that left them with a growing sense of appreciation and respect for the genre, would unsurprisingly be left with nothing much to say about the concern-free thrills and spills of a film like Friday the 13th. They were never the audience for it. A critical review of Friday the 13th during its release was like asking a sommelier for their thoughts on Coca-Cola. Audiences, on the other hand, well, they love Coca-Cola. They know maybe it's a little bad for them, that it's cheaply made and is by no means a fine dining experience, but it's fun and fizzy and light. That's Friday the 13th in a nutshell. And it's kinda why I love it too. Out of the 4 big slasher franchises I'm covering this Wholesome Halloween season, it's probably my least favourite of the lot and never reaches even close to the highs of the other 3 for me. But in some ways, it's a lot more consistent as a franchise and, for the most part, never quite reaches their lowest lows either. It knows exactly what it is, and with some of the sequels that follow it only embraces that further. In a sense, I have almost exclusively good things to say about it, because the good stuff is there, and the bad stuff, the dodgy acting, the refusal to engage with its own ideas and themes, the lack of any characterization in its main cast outside of its killer, they accidentally make the film better by becoming part of its whole charm. It's the Bob Ross of slasher movies. There are no mistakes, only happy accidents. If there's one thing I could pick out that I have absolutely nothing good to say about though, a part of the movie I just totally and completely hate, it would be a scene early on in the film, in which the campers find a snake in one of the cabins and then kill it. Now I hate to bring the mood down, but the particular reason I hate this scene is because those are not practical effects they used at that point. I'm not going to show it for obvious reasons, but they just violently kill a real snake on film. And this isn't some weird film urban legend either. In the documentary Crystal Lake Memories, actress Janine Taylor, who played Marcy, confirms this and expressed regret over it. So it seems even the people involved with the film agree this might have been a messed up move. At least some of them anyway. There really is no justification for it. The scene wasn't in the original script, it was added later after makeup and prosthetics artist Tom Savini got the idea when he found a snake in his own cabin. It doesn't add anything of note, like a very minor jump scare at best. It hardly adds any particular degree of tension or atmosphere, and this wasn't like a wild, dangerous snake or anything that slithered its way onto set and had to be dealt with in some way, and they just decided to get that on camera, although personally I think even that would be pretty fucking tacky. But it was actually a harmless bull snake that a handler had provided, and although there's no concrete statement regarding his involvement, a lot of reports suggest he did not know of his pet's fate and was incredibly upset and had to be held back by crew members after it happened. This is, without a doubt in my mind, the absolute worst thing the entire franchise has done. Worse than any of the coming shitty plot points, worse than any exploitative male-gazy titillation, worse than any cash-in reboot. This fucking sucks. I hate it. I wish it wasn't in the movie, and it genuinely brings the film so far down for me, I can't not associate this film with this scene. Anytime I go to watch it, I know it's coming. Anytime I recommend it, I know it's there. Which is the only reason why I bring it up so aggressively here, because I personally cannot in good conscience talk about this film and possibly be the reason someone who hasn't seen it before goes out and views it not knowing that such a thing is coming. Some people might think I'm going overboard here with how much I'm really going in on this, but to those people I ask, what if the crew had killed, say, a chimp? Would that be okay? If not, why not? The only difference is in how much we as a society humanize different animals. I think if they'd done that to something like a monkey, the film wouldn't even seen the light of day. And we kind of cut the film some slack because, oh, they just killed a snake. But as far as I see it, it's still a needless death of an animal for a scene that wasn't even supposed to be in the movie. I genuinely can't forgive its presence here, and I wouldn't feel comfortable in doing my job as presenter of this fun little cozy horror show if I just skimmed past this. Anyway, so we don't end on a downer note. Really depressing animal kill aside, the film does have value in some of the things we talked about. And thankfully, I guess either they learned their lesson or just grew into a bit of a more professional outfit for future entries into the franchise. As while animals would be used in further films, thankfully none of them to my knowledge were ever killed for their part. And as it happens, Kane Hodder, who later came on board to begin playing Jason from part 7 onwards, and who you will soon find out is the best Jason, refused to hurt animals, even in the fictional sense. When a director called for him to kick a dog for a scene, Kane simply point blank refused, stating that Jason wouldn't do that, and the scene was cut at his insistence. Right, Slad. Gun on, Kane. Anyway, that's all I have to say on Friday the 13th for now, but don't worry, as I'll be back as soon as tomorrow to revisit Camp Crystal Lake for Friday the 13th Part 2. As always, thanks for watching. Make sure to like if you enjoyed this video to help this series get seen by more people, and comment letting me know what your favourite Friday the 13th is. And if you don't want to miss tomorrow's video, be sure to subscribe to my OnlyDans at the red button below and hit the bell so you don't miss the notification. Also, if you're feeling particularly supportive, you can help out the channel massively by becoming a patron in the Patreon link in the description, and that'll give you access to a bunch of exclusive stuff, including Q&A videos, original short films, unused scripts, movie pitches, an active private Discord channel, and much more. Anyway, as always, I've been Dan Drambles. Thanks for watching Wholesome Halloween 2 / a season, and I will see you tomorrow.